I'm George Jensen. I'm with the Department of Rhetoric and Writing at University of Arkansas, Little Rock. This is the first of a series of videos on how to do documentation. And what we're going to do with this initial video is to explain some of the basics of documentation, why we do it, what are the major sources or approaches to documentation. And then we're going to walk you through some short steps that will help to instruct you on how to actually do the documentation. First, let's talk a little bit about why we do documentation in academic writing. Academic writing is really a way of building knowledge. The knowledge is built through a conversation. What we're doing is we're taking what other people have said, the work that they've done, and we're trying to build on that and add to the conversation. Because it's a conversation, what we need to do is we need to, in some way, acknowledge the sources that we're using. We need to give a nod to the people who have said something about this subject before us. The way we do that, one of the ways that we do that, is we put quotation marks around other people's words when we bring them into our text. So that when we're quoting something, what we'll be doing is introducing the quote. We may say something like, John Bennett says, and then we will place the quote within quotation marks. We may even comment on the quote. We may argue with it. We may analyze it. We may add to it. But basically, whenever we're incorporating quotes into our writing, we want to make sure that we have quotation marks around the exact words of other people so that we know that those are someone else's words, not our own. But we also want to have a way of acknowledging that source so that someone else can find out where it came from. And the way that we do this is we in some way tag that source or that quote. It might be with a footnote, it might be with an in-text citation, which are those little citations within parentheses, and then somewhere else in the document. It might be at the bottom of the page, it might be in a works cited page at the end of the paper. We're going to give you the full information about where to find that quote. So then you can go to that source. You can find out if it was quoted accurately. You can find out if maybe it was quoted out of context or unfairly. Or you can go to that article or that book and you can learn more about that quote. And you can use it in your own writing. One of the best ways to do research is pay attention to footnotes, works cited pages, reference lists, bibliographies, because those give you sources that you can go out and read and incorporate into your own papers. So this is part of what we're doing with documentation. Now, a few of the other things that you might hear people talking about when they talk about documentation. You might hear them talking about courtesy. It is a matter of courtesy. If someone else has done some work and you acknowledge that work in your documentation, then that's paying them courtesy for the work that they've done. You might also hear it talked about in terms of academic honesty. That if you're drawing from someone else's work, you need to let them know, or let the reader know, that this information comes from another source. Even if it's paraphrased, even if it's in your own words, you want to acknowledge that that information came from another source. So in this video, in these series of videos, what we're going to be doing is we're going to introduce you into first some of the basics of documentation. And we're even going to spend a little time talking to you about books, articles, internet sources, and what is the information in those kinds of sources that you need to pay attention to then use in your documentation. And we'll be then moving on to introduce you into the major, most frequently used forms of documentation. Those are the Modern Language Association, which is generally referred to as MLA. The American Psychological Association, which is generally referred to as APA. And the Chicago Manual of Style, sometimes that's also called Turabian. We're going to give you a brief introduction into all of those. You're not going to need to know each of those sources usually. But what we'll do is we'll set it up so that you can go directly to videos on Chicago Manual of Style or on APA, MLA, without having to learn the whole system. But first, we'll give you a few introductory videos that will teach you the basics. Now, a couple of qualifications here. You want to find out what kind of source is used in your major or is preferred by your teacher. Some disciplines will have their own source, so that you may want to ask your professors, what kind of documentation format do you want us to use? Usually they're going to say APA, MLA, or Chicago Manual of Style, but always ask. The second thing, make sure that you have the most up-to-date version of that handbook or that manual, because they are updated from time to time. Most of the updates are fairly minor. They make minor changes here and there. But it's always best to use the most up-to-date format. One final thing, you can check on the internet for various kinds of aids on how to do MLA, APA, and Chicago Manual of Style. There are some very good handbooks out there, or little handouts that are very condensed, very concise, very clear. I'm not going to necessarily direct you to a specific source because those sources change so quickly. But they are out there, and you'll be able to find those if you look. So hope you join us for the other videos, and see you then.